This is episode number 538 of the InnerFight podcast. Welcome back to another edition of the show, folks, and big shout out to our show sponsors, Smith Street Paleo. Hop over there, smithstreetpaleo.com. Recipes, meal plans, and I can tell you, because I've been on the site and I've eaten a lot of the food, loads of yummy treats. If you do have a sweet tooth but you want something healthy, smithstreetpaleo.com. Not sure I should be really promoting all of the sweet stuff, but there is a lot of good sweet stuff over there. So please do go and check it out, smithstreetpaleo.com. Welcome back to another show, folks. And last week you heard from one person that has summited Everest this season. Today we're going to hear from another, but this is not Sean James's first summit of Everest. He's been there multiple times before. He has quite an incredible story about climbing, about mountaineering, and this show, he shares it with us and shares some super interesting advice. If you want to go to Everest or you want to go and climb a mountain, this guy may well be the person that can take you there. Super good show. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the show, folks. And as I was saying there in the introduction, we have another human being who is pushing the limits. Sean James joins us. Multiple Everest Summiter. Mate, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It was about 3 weeks ago, summited this time.
Yeah.
Minus 40 degrees.
Wow.
And today, plus 47 in Dubai. So it's a swing of about 90 degrees. And
well, I notice you're wearing a jumper still, mate.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're feeling hot in here. But, mate, let's kick off with a little bit. This is nothing new to you, climbing up mountains. But I want to know, where did it all start?
Well, it first started with rock climbing, which is very different from big mountains.
Yeah.
And you've probably seen Cliffhanger and Sylvester Stallone hanging off a snowy peak by his fingers.
Yeah.
But rock climbing really is indoor stuff.
Right.
Or on limestone in the south of France. Nice weather, bolts, fairly safe.
Yeah.
But then in my mid-30s, I had a few shoulder problems, finger problems.
Right.
Had them injected. And you can't keep the level up then.
Right.
So I moved to mountaineering, which is basically just high altitude trekking, some people would say.
Right.
And commercial trips now on 8,000 meter peaks. We don't even take an ice axe to the summit, really.
Really?
No, we take it to base camp and we get the guys to practice and do the technical stuff.
Yeah.
But there's fixed ropes from ABC to the summit, which is, well, it's 3 or 4 days walking. So
Right.
you can clip in,
Yeah.
and you could never let go of the rope, really.
We'll come to that safety part in a little while, mate.
Yeah.
I think one thing that when we see people that are sort of doing a lot of what you're doing and
Yeah.
you're mountaineer, you're summiting, all these things, everyone goes, why? Like, why do you want to do it? So
I'm not going to give you the obvious answer because it's there or the mountains are calling. They just make me bad. But I think I've just fallen into it. And I've always worked in that arena anyway.
Right.
When I was younger, it was because I wanted to summit the mountains myself.
Right.
They were expensive. Average trip is about $50,000.
Yeah.
So working was the obvious step.
Right.
Now I've got a bit older, probably a bit calmer. It's nice to see people who you wouldn't expect to summit Everest, to actually summit.
Yeah.
And to get 100% on a trip is a great thing. It doesn't
Amazing.
always happen, and
Yeah.
this time we had 3 people. One didn't summit.
Right.
He got to about 8.6 because we had some problems with the oxygen and the Sherpa. But he could have summited. But it's always nice to put everyone on the top, especially their first time.
We were talking about that a little bit before we started recording, like what causes people to get undone on Everest. Obviously they need to be fit, and I love the analogy you used. You need to be running, if it was a 10k, you need to be running a 35-minute 10k.
I think that's the same level of performance that you would need.
Yeah.
And the amount of effort and training and dedication. So, because I've run sub 35 10k, so I know how much that took me.
Right.
And even though I've been quite a way down this journey with Everest now, I still appreciate how much I've put in.
Yeah.
So I go back year after year.
Right.
So it's not like my fitness dips off.
Yeah.
And the same with Ironman as well. You have maybe a purple patch of 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
and then it's a real struggle to progress or to improve your times. If you want to just enjoy it, that's great, but
yeah,
I'm not sure we want to.
Yeah, exactly,
we want to
mate.
do that.
So if people are thinking about that, mate, obviously you've got such a great amount of experience as leading these trips. If people are thinking about it, where would they start fitness-wise to start preparing to climb these sort of mountains?
Well, difficult, because if you think you can do it, you're probably halfway there anyway.
Yeah.
It's difficult because people say, oh, my strongest facet is in my mind. And I say, well, that's great, but I'd love it if your legs could get you to the top as well. Your mind is fantastic.
Yeah.
Because we have lots of princesses and types of people at base camp. So the mind, people are going to go crazy for 2 months anyway at base camp, and it changes them. So in terms of the strength, I think you can start anywhere. I mean, it's obviously a good weight loss for some people. I actually put weight on now because my body is so used to it.
Really?
Well, yeah, and the food is different.
Yeah.
So I don't eat at base camp what I eat at home. I eat probably 3 meals a day at base camp, cooked, 2 helpings of carbohydrate every meal, plus chocolates and Coca-Cola and beer.
Really?
Here, if you do that with triathletes, they'd look at you and say...
It sounds like base camp's a bit of a rave, mate. You've got all that food, chocolate and beer and Coca-Cola.
That's one of the reasons I go back every year as well, because it almost is like a summer camp.
Really?
All the guides know each other, so it's like going back and meeting each other, and we've got our little places at base camp where we stay, and there's a routine. And for 2 months, life's very simple.
I can imagine.
So we actually look forward to it. I think for guides, it's probably not hardship. The biggest problem is dealing with the clients and their issues. So
let's talk about that a little bit, mate. And you alluded there. You said you had a group up on Everest this year. How does all of that work? How many people do you take? How does it all come together?
The one guy who was the driver behind this trip was a guy called Julian Evans. He lives in London. He works with Knight Frank.
Right.
So he's very busy. He works 90, 100 hours a week. Very strong. He also raises a lot of money for charity. And what he wanted to do this year was tick one of the mountains on what's called the Explorers Grand Slam.
Right.
So that's the 7 summits plus North and South Pole.
Right.
Now, he's done a lot of them.
Yeah.
And only about 70 people ever have done this Explorers Grand Slam as opposed to the 7 Summits Grand Slam.
Okay.
He's done North Pole, South Pole, Vincent. He failed on Aconcagua. He's done Denali. I think he's done Kili. So he's done quite a few of them now. But his main reason was to raise money for the Matt Hampson Foundation, which is sports injuries.
Oh, amazing!
And it was a friend of his who broke his back in the English rugby team.
Wow!
And now he's in a wheelchair. So he actually raised £300,000 for that charity.
Wow!
And he's still going. Yeah. So that was really good. And his idea was to make a film of us summiting. So we had him, Julian. We had Stuart, who was the cameraman. Never been on a mountain in his life before.
Wow!
But he holds 2 world records for rowing across the Atlantic and rowing across the Indian. Right. So he's pretty useful. So the level of experience...
Yeah.
I mean, he went to Scotland once to train, and then we gave him a bit of practice on the glacier. So that level of experience, I'm happy with.
Yeah.
I'd met him before. He's a really good guy. He's fit, super strong. And the third guy was a guy called Yuri from Russia, who owns an IT company, lives in Crimea.
Wow.
I've climbed Manaslu with him, which is 8,000 meters. He's also done Dalgiri, Choyoyu. So he's done quite a few 8,000 meter peaks as well. So we're a pretty strong team, nice and small. I could see how everyone was changing and reacting really quickly rather than the bigger group, say with 8 or 10.
Yeah.
So that was the main reason we went on the north side.
Right.
Because of Julian. I'd taken him 2 years ago on another trip, so I knew him. And he wanted to come with me, so he said, can you organise 2019.
Wow.
And we got it together, saw them in London, and we had a great time. He summited.
Yeah.
Over the moon. I mean.
So who didn't make it?
Stuart.
Right. And why? He's too busy rowing.
No. He was, well, you saw all the media this year about the oxygen and the Sherpa. And we started off at 8:30 in the evening from high camp to go for the summit. I could see a big group coming up from below, so I grabbed Julian and said, right, let's go quick, because I wanted to get ahead of this group.
Yeah.
Yuri was strong, so he followed us as well. But Stu got left maybe 5 or 10 minutes behind.
Right.
Now, we all had our own Sherpas anyway, so that wasn't a problem. And supposedly we had radios as well, so we could keep in contact. And 10 minutes might only be 100 meters on the mountain, so you could see him. But gradually he dropped back, Stuart. And his Sherpa had summited Everest 3 times before, but not on the north side.
Right.
The north side is a lot windier, steeper, colder.
Why did you choose the north side then? You said because of
I've
Julian.
done that 3 times before.
Right.
And I was happy with it.
Right.
Okay. It has less people on it.
Right.
It has easier access. You can drive. The south side is a bit renowned for kind of people who spend more time on social media, or
it's a bit more of a tourist route.
It's a bit tourist route. There's people, tourists like trekkers, walking in and around base camp and spreading diseases and things like that. But I was just comfortable with the north side anyway. Okay. But yeah, Stuart left behind with his Sherpa, and then at about 8,600 meters, his Sherpa said, "No, I'm not going on anymore."
Oh,
yes. So Stuart goes, "Right, can I have the radio to talk to Sean?" Sherpa goes, radio doesn't work, haven't got the radio.
Oh my God.
So Stuart's thinking, right, he's carrying 1 bottle of oxygen in himself, by himself, Stuart, and it's nearly empty. The Sherpa's carrying fine, all the other bottles that he needs. But Stuart doesn't have that experience to make the decision to go on by himself, take his own oxygen, or find anyone else.
Wow.
So he made the correct decision and turned around with the Sherpa.
Play.
Brilliant.
That must be incredibly hard, mate. We hear that a lot, sort of the ego gets in the way and people just go beyond their limits, or they don't really understand. But that's incredible.
It's a massive decision. I mean, I've had people, I hate to turn people around. 2017, I had one guy, we got to about 8,000 meters. I'd been on expedition with him before, so I knew him. But he sat down, he looked terrible, white as a ghost. He said, right, I think I'm going to let everyone down. And he was really emotional, and I don't want to let anyone down because he'd been sponsored. Yeah. And he said, I think, what should I do? So I said, look, you've got to go down. You're not letting anyone down. Wow. And I posted about this conversation on Facebook, and he actually got more respect for turning around and going down. He went down by himself. And then waited at the North Col, which is still 7,000 meters for us, to come down. And he was really excited for us to summit. But that was another great. I try and wait until people, give them as much chance as you can without risking
harsh
fingers.
words. Harsh words after to Stuart Sherpa, or how does that sort of play out?
Well, it's his life as well, so he made that decision. We don't know why. For the 4 of us, we had 5 Sherpas. Only 2 of them made the summit. Wow. So this year, our Sherpas were probably not the standard or the commitment that we expected normally. Right. So, 3 of them turned around and went down before the high camp. So, there was 3 of us on the summit, me, Yuri and Julian, with just
no
2
Sherpa.
No, we had 2
Sherpas.
2 Sherpas. So our lead Sherpa, Latka, who was fantastic, and another Sherpa called Bibash. Wow. And he actually got hit on the head by a piece of rock coming down just below the summit. Wow. Big patch opened in his skull.
Oh my goodness.
He had to have stitches.
Wow.
He was Yuri's Sherpa. Right. Yuri's really experienced, so he looked after him and said, right, throw your rucksack away, leave all the oxygen, we're going down as fast as we can. Really? So the Sherpa, descended from about 8,700 with no oxygen, no rucksack,
and a big hole in his head.
We gave him a helmet because he's going to K2 this week. Oh, so he gave him a helmet when he got to base camp. Yeah.
Mate, you spoke there a little bit about the south side being a bit touristy and what we've seen in the news. I was on, and we spoke about this with Tima a few days ago. I was on the BBC, and if you put in Mount Everest at the moment into BBC News, you literally get 12 articles from the last that climbing window that we've been through. We've got things about Sherpas, we've got things about tourism, too many tourists. We've got that image of people just
weather, queues.
What's your take on it, mate? As an experienced mountaineer and multiple Everest summiter, like, where are we at with this?
Well, it drives me crazy, and I'm glad when I get home so that I can not look at Facebook and Instagram as well. And most of the comments are coming from people who've summited or made a living from mountaineering as well.
Wow.
So why they're actually trying to promote that sort of image for Everest,
it's weird.
It's everyone, As soon as there's a bit of bad weather or a death, they've always got a comment about it.
Yeah.
I mean, the same week that, 5 or 8 people died, there was a ferry sank in Austria.
Yeah.
So, I've been on a boat, but I didn't phone the BBC up and say, look, I know we should have swimming lessons before we get on a ferry. It drives you crazy.
Yeah.
There's this season 11 people who died,
and
11 people too many.
Yeah.
But it's going to happen. 80 people die a day in the UK from obesity-related diseases.
Right.
Why are they not doing it a day?
Yeah.
Why are they not doing anything about that?
Very good points.
It's...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, we're almost focusing on things that, it's very sad when someone loses their life, and it's very sad, especially, I think, the way that the media maybe portrays a death on Everest, that you just sort of left there. And that, we saw in this rubbish cleanup as well that they found some bodies that had been left there, and it sounds quite gory, but at the end of the day, like you say, 80 people a day in the UK are dying because of the food they're eating.
Yeah, and you can't really, if you could do something about it on Everest, you'd bring them down. But if the family is always contacted, and if the family wants them to stay there, the bodies will be left there. I think the Chinese a few years ago tried to clean it up, but what do? They push them off to try and hide them. But they're trying to clean up the rubbish as well. But
what's your thoughts on the rubbish?
Well, I go out to the lakes by Al Qudra, and I see trees full of plastic bags and barbecues everywhere.
It's terrible, isn't it?
It's much worse.
Yeah, it is much worse.
1,000 people on Everest Base Camp, that can be cleaned up pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's not like we're just chucking oxygen and gas off the mountain. If we can bring it down, we'll bring it down.
Yeah, and I think that was a super good example there. The Sherpa gets hit in the head with a rock. Yeah. He's in the death zone. He's at 8,000 something meters. You've got to get him down as fast as you can.
We're not worried about his rucksack.
Exactly. It's interesting. What about the overcrowding and the issuing of climbing permits?
Well, north side, the Chinese set a limit this year of 300.
Okay.
And they were actually 140.
Wow.
So then they're nowhere near home. They're nowhere. No, they didn't even apply. Only 140 applied.
Right.
South side, I don't think they're at their limit either.
Right. So why are we getting this congestion and these images? Is it a true reflection?
Because it's a very thin path. So there's going to be have you seen the bike leg on a Dubai triathlon?
Yeah. They're all sat behind each other.
It's a draft legal race, isn't it?
Basically,
it would never happen. That's the whole point of adventure, that it polices itself.
Yeah.
There is a level of risk, but if somebody came there, like the Chinese are starting to do, and said, right, you can climb on the 20th, you can climb on the 21st, that would not appeal to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It would, who want to summit, but then you might as well just get a helicopter and touch down at the top.
Yeah.
Mont Blanc are doing it now. I think they only they have 20,000 summits a year, Mont Blanc in France. And they've issued only, I think, 100 permits a day now.
Okay.
So it's already starting to...
A little bit of control.
To control, but it takes the fun out of that sort of sport.
That was what I was just thinking then as you were talking, like, what does that do for you as this sport is your life, exploring is your life, the adventure is your life? What do you do? Do you just go to the more remote places?
Yeah, there's plenty of other mountains, and in terms of recreation research, that's what happens. Honeypots develop, and then they become too popular, and then they don't become honeypots anymore. So people naturally find these things. Like K2 is now going to become more popular.
Yeah.
And you'll see queues on K2.
Wow. Which is by statistics, the most dangerous.
Yeah, statistics, because it has Pakistani high-altitude climbers
Right.
Who set the rope up. Now, they're not as skilled or as dedicated as Nepali Sherpas.
Right.
So what's happening is now all the groups are taking Nepali Sherpas to Pakistan to set the ropes up. Summits are getting smashed every year. The ropes are much better. Assuming the weather's fine, I don't want to say it's a procession, but it's going to become very similar to Everest. It's only a mountain with snow on it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's lower, right?
Yeah, it's lower, yeah. It's like...
How high is K2?
8,611, so about
200
meters.
200 meters lower.
Vertical gain, so that could mean 2 or 3 hours.
Wow.
But the difference as well is the gradient. It's a lot steeper.
Yeah.
And the campsites are a lot more dangerous as well. But
mate, talk us through some of the more challenging parts of your multiple summits of Everest, or all these things. Like, what can go wrong and how do you deal with it? Because I think that's quite useful for some of the listeners, because I think people can then take those lessons back into life, because I know there's so much to be learned from what you guys do.
Well, you can only be as fit as you can at the time that you start Everest. So whatever your work schedule is or your family schedule, you can only do as much training as you can possibly do. And if you turn up, it's like a race. If you turn up and say, well, I could have done more, I'm not quite on it, well, then you're not going to get very far. Yeah. So turn up with whatever you've got. Some people will be stronger, some people will be weaker, different strategies. But in terms of success, it's probably the older people who tend to summit Everest the most.
Right.
Because young lads like yourself, 30s, 40s.
I'm 40 now. They keep
telling me late 30s.
They keep telling me I'm old.
they see the old guy, like, and say, "Oh, we can race him up. What was your time last year? What was your time? Oh, we'll beat that." And it's always guys in their 20s and 30s who suffer from altitude sickness, not because of any genetic, but because they rush it, because they're a bit stressed, because they have something to prove. Yeah. So females and maybe 40s, 50s, they do much more success. They wander around, talk, take their time. They don't rush when they see the bad weather forecast. And then it's about staying fit and healthy. Right. Like I said, on the south side, a lot of trekkers come in, and that Khumbu Valley is just ridden with flu and coughs. And if someone walks in and says, "Can I have a cup of tea?" I mean, I've known expedition leaders to say, get out my tent, don't bring any diseases, because you're virtually isolated in your own group for 2 months. Right. And it's the same with a triathlon or an Ironman. Just before the race, you don't want to go into your kid's school and start touching. Yeah. It's like, so you want to keep healthy. And at altitude, base camp is 5,000 meters. Right. If you do get a chest infection, it takes so much longer to recover. Yeah. So go into the whole expedition as fit as you can, as healthy as you can. Don't run yourself down. Try not to overwork if you can before you go on expedition. Yeah, right. I'm quite lucky as well, because between expeditions I just lie around and
think about the next one and talk on podcasts and stuff like that.
You know, rest is probably the biggest thing that's going to make you stronger. You don't get stronger when you're training. Yeah, it's when you go home and rest. Yeah.
So that's what they need, mate. You've brought with you a framed copy of your certificate, and if we can put that up to the camera, folks, if you are watching and if you're listening, go over to our social media and you're going to see a nice picture of this certificate.
That is this year's. That is given by the Chinese Mountaineering Association, and as soon as you come down from the summit, you have to prove that you've been on the summit.
How do you do that?
You take a picture at the top, hopefully. Right. There's some times where I haven't got pictures because it's been so dark and cold. Wow. And this time I got my camera out and the lens froze. Oh, wow. So luckily one of my friends took a picture of me, and we got one of Julian, and we got one of the Sherpas as well. So we managed to show that. But I've been there quite a few times to China, so they actually take me. I'm not going to say.
Mate, talking about that certificate and talking about a little bit more the tourism side of Everest, how much does something like that mean to you?
To me, Well, I've got a few of them. So no, it's pretty special. I gave my first one to my mum and dad, and they're fantastic. And I was telling you the story of when I got the first one.
This is quite a good story.
I got the first one, and I went back to the UK to see my mum and dad, and I had this certificate, and I was going to get it framed like this.
Yeah.
And I went into the local village frame shop, and the guy was like, he took it. He said, "Oh," I said, "Can you frame this like straight away? I need to give it as a present." He's like, "Oh, okay." He went out the back, like in this little shop, came out a couple of minutes later with his daughter, with his wife, and they were like, "Is this a real certificate?" I'm like, yeah. When did he submit? And the time was about a week ago.
No
and
way.
He's like, and obviously they'd seen all the media, because every year there's media.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, can we have a picture? Can we have a picture?"
Amazing.
So Everest, I think, is different than any other 8,000 meter peak, which I've summited before, but you don't get that special thing.
Yeah.
If you say you summited Choi Oyu, they go, "Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, nice." Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Manaslu, they go, "Oh, okay." But Everest is like, "Wow, can we have a picture?"
Yeah.
And you get it all the time.
It's amazing.
We had shirts, down jackets made up this time with Everest 19 on the back.
Right.
And I wore one around the Malvern Hills before I went away, and you could see everyone like looking.
Yeah.
And I was walking with my dad, and we got to the top of this pinnacle, and there was a family there. So I said, "Could he take a picture of me and my dad?"
Yeah.
And they could see the Everest and the logo on there, and they're like, "Oh, okay." And this was before the Everest season.
No.
So like, "Oh, great, can we have a picture as well?"
Really?
And it's so funny. People just change. I don't think you change, maybe. But people, their reaction to you
towards you
changes.
Well, it's something. It is something. I think that's painted in the media as something quite incredible, and it is something quite incredible. What about those people, mate? That certificate is their sole purpose. They're just going to say that they've stood on top of the world. That it's not mountaineering for you is somehow in your blood. We can feel it from your energy. You know. What about those people?
Well, they've still got the certificate. It's the same. It doesn't matter if they're nice people. I mean, that wasn't your question. If some people go there with the wrong attitude and they're not nice people.
Right.
But if they've just gone there to get the certificate, that's fantastic.
To tick the box and to get it done.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. You can't ban people because of their motivations.
Yeah.
Maybe because of their behaviour, but not because they want to do it for another reason. I mean, most of the people there probably have a GoFundMe or give me money page, right? And that's another bone of contention that people seem to hit on at the moment. But
is it?
It's very expensive, Everest. I mean, it's average. Well, just the trip is $50,000, and it can go up to $120,000.
It's incredible, isn't it?
That's just the trip. So then you have to buy insurance, the gear, flights.
Yeah.
So it's not a small outlay.
It's not. It is quite nice though how people are using it to raise money for charities. Like you said, the guys with you raised over £300,000. Like you really impacted a lot of people's lives with that. Yeah,
there was another charity there at the same time called Wooden Spoon.
Yep.
And they're sponsored by rugby.
Yeah.
England Rugby.
Yeah, England
and
Rugby,
they set 2 world records: highest game of touch and the highest sevens match.
No way.
Yeah, so we saw people like Lee Mears and all these ex-rugby players there.
Yeah.
I mean, they were on their hands and knees. It was fantastic.
But
but they had the posts, and you should.
It creates a lot of positive vibes, mate. You said something there about being in the UK and people have this thing around Everest. But there's a lot of other, like the 7 summits are all, like, it's the biggest mountain on each continent. Yeah. Is Everest the hardest mountain you've been up? Or how do you define the hardest?
It's a difficult question.
Good.
Because it depends, first of all, on the weather. On a mountain like Everest, it depends on the weather. It's obviously going to be harder than something like Killy, subjectively.
Which Adrian Hayes, a mutual friend of ours, has still not summited.
So exactly. If you haven't summited it, it's the hardest mountain in the world until you summited it.
Yeah.
Julian didn't summit Aconcagua, but he summited Everest. So there's either, well, for me, there's no in between. There's either you do it or you don't. So it's impossible or possible. Yeah. Nothing's impossible.
Yeah.
I don't think. Maybe some people might find it impossible, but it's always seemed to Everest always seems to be linked with the words dream and things like that. But I don't think you can dream about Everest. You have to do it.
Yeah.
It's like training.
Yeah.
You have to put the training in, and then something happens. You can't just... Dream is a very bad word for me. It's like... I don't like that.
It's very interesting, mate. And that's... I think that's one of the things as well, is that you said that the mountain you're on is almost the hardest mountain or something along those lines. And like everyone's always trying to say, even in endurance sport, if you say, okay, what's harder, an Ironman triathlon or a multi-stage ultra running race?
Yeah, or
like,
a sprint triathlon.
Yeah.
They're both. You go full out on, you put virtually everything in.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes I don't give 100% now on Everest because I know what's coming and it might feel, but I don't know. You never know how much more you've got, do you? So
yeah, and I think that's something that's incredible about human potential is that, you know, if we'd have sat down and had this conversation 10 years ago and say, Sean, you know, in 10 years' time, you could have potentially summited Everest 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, you know, but then when it happens, then, you know, I mean, here's a question for you. How many more times will you go up Everest?
Definitely one more, because I'd like to do the south side.
Right.
And I'd like to do the north side again, just because I quite like it. It's nice. And I was talking to Cindy, my girlfriend, last night, and she'd like to do it as well, so that may be another so maybe 3 times.
And if I call you up, mate, and you're not up to much that day, maybe you'll say yes to me as well.
Why do you think I'm here?
Exactly. That was actually the message. Do you want to take a group next year? So folks that are listening, the thousands of people that we have listen, make sure if you do want to go up Everest, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to get involved later, but that's...
The other thing we get is when you say, oh, I've done Everest, they go, oh, base camp. And you say, oh.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they don't believe that you do the summit.
It's almost like the Dubai Marathon. I ran the Dubai Marathon 10K this year. No, you didn't run the Dubai Marathon. You ran the 10K. It's interesting, mate. Like when you talk about that human potential and where it might be, like you've easily got up to four more summits that we've just rattled off easily there, right?
Yeah, and 2 more 8,000ers this summer. So
talk to us about those, mate. What happens?
That's Pakistan. So I leave on Friday. It's meant to be one of the easiest 8,000 meter peaks in the world, but all the stories I've read and research I've done just show avalanches and deaths again. So
wow.
But called Gasherbrum 1 and Gasherbrum 2. Okay. So you trek for 7 days towards K2, and then just at the confluence of the glacier, you turn right, and they're both up there. So and from the same base camp. And no, I've just got one friend, so this should be a holiday.
Wow.
Australian friend called Ben, and we'll hopefully climb them pretty quick. I've climbed with him lots before. He's a really nice guy. So
wow.
It should be a different experience.
How does that go, mate? You've just come back from Everest, and we've been talking the whole show that it's the biggest and it's big up there and it's busy. You're now going for 2 months on a trip with one other guy. To be honest, naively, I've heard of some of the big. I've heard of K2. I've never heard of those things. How does motivation for you? Does it change?
Well, there's 14 8,000 meter peaks. They're all pretty high, all pretty hard.
Yeah.
Some are more dangerous. Now I've done a few of them, but we were really looking for one that we could do ourselves without massive Sherpa support or base camp support.
Right.
And Gasherbrum 2's they're both just over 8,000 meters.
Yeah.
And we could hopefully do them pretty quickly without much hassle.
Right.
It's very difficult to look for a mountain after you've done Everest.
Yeah.
That you want to go up.
Yeah.
With Cindy, we do a lot of nice mountains, so that helps me relax and do things like that. And I like to show her. We tried Mount Cook in New Zealand a few years ago, and that was probably a bit too much for both of us at the time. But then we went and did the other one, Tasman, which was really nice. So hopefully she's building up some... She's probably been on more mountains than most people, really. She doesn't realise it. But no, it's nice to climb with her. Yeah. There's a few in the old Russian states that are over 7,000 metres. There's 5 of them. Right. And if you climb all 5... you get an award called the Snow Leopard.
Right, okay.
Because they're really hard, even though they're only 7,000 metres.
Technically challenging?
Both. Right. Weather's a nightmare, avalanche, remote, nobody there.
Wow.
Big deaths. So, and the vertical gain. So base camp's about 4,000, the summit's 7, so that's 3 metres.
Yeah.
3,000 meters, which is the same vertical gain as Everest.
Right.
But you've got to carry all your own stuff there. Or you don't have to, but it's recognised that you do. And there's no Brit who's done all 5, ever.
Wow.
So that's a big thing as well.
That could be...
Yeah, I've been there a few times, but it really is hard. I mean, yeah, they're probably pretty hard. Yeah.
How do these trips come about, mate? You obviously, like with Everest, maybe there's 8-9 months longer of planning, or do you just throw trips together quite quickly? How does it all come around?
You can throw it together quickly. The main issue is the permit. So there's a closing date for the permit. North side, I think, February in the same year you have to apply, and similar for south side as well. But normally I would work for say a UK or a US or Australian company, and they would contract me and say, like, you want to lead this trip at this time of year, and I say I wouldn't know who the people are, how many there are, just that roughly we're going to go in that direction up the mountain.
How does that pan out?
Yeah, great.
I can imagine it must be quite interesting though, because like you said, for your Everest trip, mate, you knew the guys and you were saying, you know, Stuart's done this, and you felt, I could tell that you were really comfortable with them. Yeah. But if I've got an agency in the UK and I call you up and I say, right, I've got 8 people and 3 of them are absolute numpties, like, how do you put that together?
They won't say that. They say they're all fantastic, but
which is bullshit.
They've got so much experience that they're going to fly up this mountain, no problem. And it normally happens like that more and more now. But again, it's motivation. If someone wants to do it and they've chosen it, it is partly their responsibility to choose the right expedition as well. Right. Sometimes the people get shunted because even though a website has maybe 50 different trips, they might only sell 4 or 5. Right. So if someone applies for one that's in the middle of, I don't know, Bolivia, they're going to get shunted to Aconcagua or something to make up the numbers. Yeah. But it's up to them to say no, that I think that's a bit too much for us, and not be taken in by like. Have you had any complete nightmares? People turn up and they've just been useless. Oh, so many. You know, I've been doing this 20, 25 years now. So I try to block it out. But the thing about mountaineers is that we have very short memories. So on the way up to the summit, I'm never climbing another mountain. This is crap. Hate it. On the way down, fancy the south side next year. Really. Same with Julian, same with Stuart. They're all on the way out. Well, could you have a look at that for next? I remember, mate, the first time I ran a marathon, and I called up one of my mates and I said I was just so over it, and I called him up and I said, let's go for a coffee. It was the same day, and he said, what are you thinking? I said, mate, I'm never ever going to do one of those again, and look at the mess I got into. It's the same with everything, but no, it's good. You've just got to give yourself some recovery time, and How much? It seems like if you're leaving on Friday, you summited on the 23rd of May. You're less than a month here in Dubai before you. Quite a lot. Well, I actually got back on the 31st, or the 1st of June. So I was 7 days. We were 7 days getting out from the space camp, and getting back to Kathmandu. And I had to stay in Kathmandu for a bit because we came ahead of our bags. Okay. On summit day, I came all the way down to advanced base camp, which is the safest thing to do to get off the mountain. And then a few days later, we left, drove to Lhasa in 1 day, flew the next day to Kathmandu on the 27th. The guys flew home the same day from Kathmandu. Booked themselves business straight back to London. I stayed there for 3 more days because I was waiting for my bags, and I had a few things to sort out about what happened this year, because one of the other teams, they actually lost someone, so we were talking through that as well. Tough. So that must be quite tough when you've been to Everest so many times, and you know the other groups or the other people that are there, or the leaders, and they lose somebody. Most of the leaders are pretty cool, but you do feel for the leaders, and this guy was very close to us. He was sharing the same base camp, so we knew the guy as well, and I don't think there's really anything he could have done. He had a condition before he went, which he didn't tell them about.
Right.
So I think that contributed to it, along with a number of other factors. So they all build up, and unfortunately that happened. So yeah.
Mate, a little bit of PR for what you do.
Yeah.
For listeners that are like, yeah, this guy sounds like the guy that I want to put my life into his hands, should we say that, and get him to the top. How do people get in touch? What's the sort of process? You said you work as sort of for some tour companies, or you do private tours. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I've been living in Dubai for about 10 years now, so I'm always around Dubai. I tend to do less running and triathlon now because the heat is just killing me now.
Prefer the cold.
Oh, I've got worse. So either I'll be around here, or I'll be at a cafe called Cafe Rider. I'll be doing a talk when I get back from Pakistan in August, so hopefully I'll put some slides together then.
Yeah.
And they actually want to organise some hikes, maybe when it gets cooler, and things like that. So we're going to do something like that, or otherwise on Instagram or Facebook.
Awesome.
So just look up Sean James, and the website is mymountainhighs.com.
We'll put links to all of that in the show notes. If anyone missed that, hop over to the show notes and you will get all of those links how to contact Sean. Mate, we normally round out with this question. It's a little bit of I know it's quite broad, but I think it's a good one. You've obviously got a lot of experience, mate. If you could wrap everything up that you've learned through mountaineering into one single piece of advice that you'd leave people with, what would that piece of advice be? Sometimes I send this to people before, but most of the time I just put them on the spot like I have you, and I talk a little bit now, which is giving you a chance to think about it. But what's that one piece of advice that
I think one of the things that I said to the guys on this trip, and I actually took my dad to Kathmandu this time as well, so it was nice for him to see the setup. But I said, and the clients were asking the same question as you, like, have you ever had any nightmares on previous trips? So I said, well, I normally judge a client by if they put more into an expedition than they take out of it. Yeah. So that really means if they're high maintenance, they're going to really wind me up and they probably won't succeed. But if you put more in, if you help, if you look cheerful, if you're talking to different people, if you're not worrying about the weather, if you always go out for a hike when your leader says, let's go for a hike, or if you turn up at 5 to 8 when he says 8 o'clock, that's great. Yeah. So put more into the expedition, help other people rather than take it out. Because if you're taking more out, it's taking my time, it's taking the Sherpa's time. Yeah. And
energy, right?
Yeah, and energy, and it's just not a nice feeling. So we do get lots of people like that. But.
We spoke before we started the show that next year you'd climb K2.
Yeah, in the summer, yeah.
When you do that, mate, we have to get you back on the show. Sure. I think K2, I don't know if it's just my perception of it, but having known Adrian and what happened to him on K2 and also the different stats, which I know we've spoken about, are not always super meaningful. Yeah. But, mate, we'd love to have you back.
Well, maybe I'll have a different story next year, but I won't be so happy. But we're going to run a trek as well, so people can come along to base camp to actually see K2 as well. Wow. But Everest will be a warm-up next year and then to K2. So, yeah.
Mate, thank you so much. It's a really interesting story, Sean, and I'm sure a lot of people have learnt a lot from what you've done. And folks, do go over and make sure you connect with Sean. Get on one of his trips or talk to him about it. I'm sure he just loves to chat about it. And we'll also publicise dates for your talk that you're doing here in Dubai in August, mate, so we can get people down. But all the very best for these next two.
Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Bye.